Naoya Zenin was brought to JJS under the name Head of the Hay in the most recent update, and he's one of the most unique characters the game's had in a while. He screws with the basic game mechanics by not having things like a down slam or a forward dash, is super reliant on walls or frames to have any meaningful true combos, and has a risky, fast-paced moveset that's tough to keep up with for both the user and the opponent at times. It's a very balls-to-the-wall character that's super enjoyable to play, and as long as you know how to counter him, he's also quite fun to fight too. He's great, ignoring the early access jank, and his video is both an overview as well as some opinions. So, let's get into it. Let's first explain the frame mechanic because it's where most of Naoya's damage comes from. Some of Naoya's attacks, and his 4th M1, build up a meter on the opponent. 4th M1 and Decisive Strike build up 40%, while landing Projection Breaker on someone with no meter at all builds up 80% but otherwise inflicts nothing. If this meter reaches 100% on an opponent, they get trapped in a frame, which puts them in a stun that ends either after a very long time or after they get hit by an attack. If they get hit by an attack, the damage of that attack will be triple. The other big mechanic here is that Naoya's basic functions are different than other characters. Naoya's forward dash is replaced with something identical to a side dash, but to make up for this, he has 2 dashes that he can use back to back. Naoya also has no down slamming or uppercutting. His 4th M1 also doesn't ragdoll, but instead pushes the opponent back. All very interesting changes that need some adjusting to. His M1s also do less damage by default, making him even more reliant on the frames to do much of anything. As for moves, Naoya's first move, Projection Breaker, does a backwards dash before doing a forward dash and kick, which knocks back. The kick is blockable, but it's neutral on block, meaning you aren't guaranteed to be punished. The move does 9 damage in total, the highest in Naoya's moveset if you're solely counting the initial damage it deals, which is important for its frame gimmick, and it's just a generally solid move. If you land it on someone with 0 projection meter, it'll fill their bar up to 80%, but landing it on someone who already has projection won't add any more, meaning you're heavily encouraged to use this move to start up the bar or burst frame. The dashing of the move gives it a lot of versatility. You can use it as a counter, or turn around to use a backdash as a forward dash so that the move works even better offensively. Really fun move, all things considered. Bleedout is the second move for Naoya. In terms of execution, it's just a really quick block bypassing stab. Basically the same as rapid punches, wing throw, whatever. Where it gets interesting is the on-hit effect. First of all, it doesn't ragdoll, but instead knocks the opponent back with no ragdoll. And there's a tech that abuses this fact by flicking the camera, which turns it into a true combo extender or starter. The second cool thing is that it inflicts a bleed debuff on your opponent. On hit, the opponent gets 3 stacks of bleed. Bleed is removed by using moves, which makes the opponent take 3 damage each time a stack is removed. I have a feeling I know where Z got that idea from. Anyways, that alone would give you about 9 damage on top of the 5 that the move does on its stab. But there's more. Hitting an opponent who already has bleed with Bleedout will reset their stacks back to 3 and convert the status into Super Bleed, which passively deals damage over time that has a cap of 50 damage. So, if your opponent doesn't use enough moves to get rid of the bleed, and they get stabbed again, they're now on a race to get rid of the status unless they want to lose half their HP. It's an insanely good source of damage if you can proc it, though that won't happen too easily on most players, since they'll just naturally be using their moves in and out, unless they're an M1 reliant character like Locust Guy, who only uses their moves for combos. But even then, they'll burn through those 3 stacks the moment they land a single hit. Being a quick guard break, it's very strong regardless, and if you predict the block, it's a good move to deal with that. Decisive Strike is a move that locks you onto a target, where you then wind up a really telegraphed blockable punch. During the whole windup, you're able to turn your camera to adjust the direction your punch comes from, though if you turn too fast, the tracking won't keep up and you'll miss the punch. The tracking is very strong regardless, and while it can still miss if you flick the camera too hard, or the opponent moves extremely fast near the end of the move, it won't be dodged most of the time. The move isn't 360 blockable, which is why the ability to turn the punch is so important, because you can hit it from behind someone's block if they don't track your character properly. On hit, you do a flurry of punches, which deal 14 total damage, though the first hit only deals 5 damage, which means a frame break won't deal a lot. This ends with your opponent stunned, and you can then proceed to M1, making the move a good combo starter or extender, though not a true extender since there's no way to true combo into the move, besides frame variant 4 on someone who doesn't have ragdoll cancel. It also adds projection meter to the enemy, about the same as your 4th M1 does. Basically, it boils down to an extremely high risk, high reward move. Land it, and you get projection meter, as well as a completely free M1 combo for even more damage and projection meter, no setup required. Get blocked, and you are guaranteed to be hit by a combo from your opponent. There's no way to reduce the risk in this move, and the higher skill your opponent, the more risky the move gets. Bad players struggle hard with tracking the move and blocking it, but the higher skilled the opponent is, and the better they understand the counterplay, the more likely it is that the move turns from a free combo for you into a free combo for the opponent. There aren't many good ways to lower the risk besides turning the camera in a very disorienting way, and that's why I consider it kind of a noob stomper. I'll go into more detail on my thoughts on the move later, but this part is an initial overview, so let's move on to move 4. Cursory Impact is complete jank. It's a great move on paper, but so many different things make it a move which tends to get used only for frame bursting. When pressed, your movement speed is briefly increased. When the duration ends, you get locked in place and do a swipe forward with a very small hitbox. If landed, you knock the opponent back a far distance. If whiffed, you get put in a very punishable end lag. It does block break now after a recent update, which turned it from being practically unusable into risky but not terrible. It all sounds decently good on paper, but the movement speed is extremely hard to control, which is made worse by the bad hitbox. So the chances you land the move raw are horrific, compared to the chance you miss and get punished by a forward dash into a combo. It's very comparable to Boost On, with similar strengths and weaknesses. Hard to control, extremely punishable, and technically good for rushdowning, but takes an insane amount of skill to make work, and is unusable without that skill. Also super easy to dodge by people with decent timing. You can somewhat use it as a fourth defensive movement tool, since the movement speed lets you cover a lot of distance, so for running it's okay, but in neutral it's just really inconsistent. I did get some good use out of the move though, but you have to think of it as a generic guard break, like Bleedout, rather than anything special. You land it if you predict the block at close range, and you're not really going to be using that movement speed buff they give you at all, because it's way too inconsistent to control. In terms of my overall experience using Naoya, he's interesting. I do absolutely like a lot of the stuff Z did. The passive changes Naoya gets don't feel unfair to fight, nor do they feel horrible to use. They just require a little bit of adjusting to work out, and they make him feel super fast-paced, sort of like Yuji. The main issue I have with Naoya comes from how limited he is, which is an issue that's pretty clearly because he's early access. Naoya heavily relies on his frames to do any kind of damage, because the damage of all his moves is pitifully small. All he really has for damage outside of the frame hits is Bleedout, which is good, but in the end just one move. 3 and 4 are super risky and jank, and are hard to use against good players, outside of hitting them in frame, and so you can sometimes just get locked out of using those moves against a really good player. That means that Naoya sometimes ends up playing with only 2 moves, even though he technically has 4. And if you already have frames on someone, you're discouraged from using Projection Breaker to save that value for when the opponent has no meter or when you frame them. Add to that how 2 is a close range guard break, and it makes Naoya feel very limited to use because his game plan against good players turns into just landing 3 or 4 M1 combos with a few 2s mixed in for chip, so that you can then get the frame and then deal actual damage, with his 3 and 4 getting forgotten because of how risky they are to use, and how there's no setup to make them less risky. All your damage is backloaded too, which is to say you don't deal any outside of proccing Super Bleed, or proccing the triple damage from a frame break. Which is to say that he has a bunch of moves, but is incredibly limited in using more than just his 2, which sometimes locks him to just M1s against good players if you don't want to take huge risks. More updates might add to that setup or add variants on his 3 and 4, such as the 3 version, for example, that doesn't have tracking, meaning it can be dodged, but guard breaks instead, or some version that doesn't combo start but also isn't negative on block, something that lets his 3 and 4 work well against high skill players rather than being free combo buttons for either side. He's a bit of a potential man, though he's still a lot of fun to use, and absolutely viable at all levels of play that aren't uber sweat tier, which is sort of the ideal state of an early access. Lots of cool ideas with Naoya, most of them being really amazing, just a few of them not hitting the mark, but overall, he's really fun to play. Unlike some of the issues with Yuta and Mekamaru, Naoya does seem like his current issues are from being early access and therefore unfinished, rather than some core problem with the design. He's absolutely a playable early access, just could be better in some areas. And honestly, I'm quite satisfied with how he is, but I do see room for improvement. None of the moves feel brokenly overpowered, none of them feel truly useless, though if you're trying to play super optimally against his sweats, then his 3 and 4 become really risky. And he has a lot of uniqueness to him, most notably in how he changes up the base mechanics, which is kind of unprecedented in battleground games. Naoya is pretty cool, all things considered, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of his design as he gets finished. Anyways, if you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like and subscribe since it helps support me and help me make more content. I'm Eternally, hope you have a good day, and bye.